Hey everyone, it's Aaron here from Rudy Visuals. Hope you're all doing well today and keeping safe. In today's video, we have a pretty unique lens to review. This is the Pergear 12mm f2 for Sony E-mount. It's an ultra wide manual focus prime lens that is also available for Fuji, Nikon, and also micro four thirds cameras. Before we get into this review, full disclosure, this is not a paid or sponsored review in any way, but Pergear were kind enough to send us this for free to review. But as always, all thoughts and opinions are fully independent, but a big thank you specifically to Wendy from Pergear for making this video possible. So I think the first thing we should talk about is the price. So right now on Amazon UK, this is selling for £180, but on the official website, it's even cheaper at around $165. So I'm sure you can even get this even cheaper, like used, for example. So this is definitely not going to be like a premium lens experience. You shouldn't expect this to be like an amazing performer. It's a wallet-friendly, budget-minded lens. So it would be unfair to compare this to like, super expensive lens 10 times the price. So we are definitely going to review this, from the point of view of like a budget-minded photographer. However, for the price, one thing that really shocked me is just how nice the build quality is for a sub $200 lens. At this price point, you do expect, plastic, but this is actually a really nicely built lens. It's made from this brass material. It's got a chromed copper mount. The entire body is metal. And even though it's very small, it's still a pretty hefty 300 grams, which for the lens of this size is quite substantial. And when you compare it side by side with something like a Sony 50mm f1.8, which is a very similarly priced lens, I might add, you can feel the difference in build quality for sure. It's not amazing, not something like a Sigma lens, but honestly, the overall fit and finish, the feel of the lens itself, the focus, the aperture rings, it's pretty impressive given that this is a budget lens. So the design is also very simple. You have your aperture ring, your focus ring, and I like the ridges here on the aperture ring. It feels very much like kind of like a vintage lens from a few decades ago. I just wish that the aperture ring had more of a tactile feedback between the aperture range, as you could accidentally change this by accident without really realizing. Now, before I show you some photo samples and talk more about the specs, I should mention that this is a Sony E-mount lens that's actually designed for APS-C in mind. So we're talking about like your Sony a6000 series, which means factoring the crop factor, you're getting an effective focal length of more like 18mm. However, if you're on a full frame Sony camera like our Sony a7 III here, your R3, blah, 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 you can still use this lens with this camera as long as you have the crop sensor mode turned on. If you try to shoot this in normal full frame mode, you will get this very heavy vignetting effect, but turning on that crop mode means you can use this lens. So let's show you a few photo samples, a bit of video to give you an idea of what this lens is capable of. So let us know what you thought down in the comment section below. So my opinion is that when you factor in that price, the actual optical performance is pretty good. It's reasonably sharp, and that maximum aperture of f2 allows you to shoot in pretty low light as well, and you can even get a bit of bokeh and background blur if you wanted to. However, if you start to pixel peep, some problems do emerge. So while the sharpness is good for the price range, particularly if you step down to f5.6, f8, there is quite a lot of vignette straight out of the camera, especially wide open. And you can see in some of these examples here that, the colors look a little bit washed out. There's kind of a lack of contrast in places, and there's a lot of chromatic aberrations. It also didn't handle backlighting very well either, as you can see from like these flares here. But I do think these issues, you can kind of overlook them factoring the price. I wasn't expecting this to be an amazing performer in that sense. The images do, however, have this almost film-like quality to them, which is something you may like or dislike depending on your personal preference. I think the main selling point is probably that really wide perspective that you can get. Of course, you do get that very distorted, almost like a fisheye look, but depending on your needs, that can be a plus. For example, if you're intentionally trying to get that epic wide look that make your people look really tall and give you more of a surreal, distorted look. You know, it works really well for that. If we do compare these shots here with the Pergear and a Sony 50mm f1.8, you can see how much of a difference that wider angle makes to the look and feel of the photo. This would also make it really good for like environmental shots, you know, landscapes, humanity, travel, architecture, astrophotography. However, because this is a manual focus only lens, it's probably not ideal for, well, it isn't ideal for fast moving subjects. And while you could use this for video, you know, like vlogging, stuff like that, the lack of autofocus means that it probably won't be the most reliable lens to use. However, I personally do like using manual focus lenses. I learned photography on an old vintage 50mm lens, and that was fully manual focus, and it does kind of force you and teaches you a lot of things that an autofocus lens can't. So I personally wouldn't let that put you off if you've never used manual focusing before. Plus, a lot of these newer Sony cameras do come with focus peaking built in, so you can see what is in focus if your eyes are not very good, like mine. You could even get a cheap monitor as well, as most of those have built-in focus peaking too. The optical system itself consists of 12 elements in 9 groups, and the aperture range goes from f2 to f22 with 10 aperture blades. So for me, the look of the background blur wide open at f2 it's an acquired taste. It's not the smoothest bokeh I've ever seen. It can look a little bit messy and chaotic at times. The chromatic aberrations don't really help as well. But I imagine, you know, if you're using a lens like this, you're not really trying to shoot at f2, trying to blur out the background. That's not really what this lens was designed for, I think. It also has a minimum focusing distance of 20 centimeters, which is pretty good, as it means you can get quite close and personal to subjects while keeping it in focus. So personally, I think it's kind of a mixed bag depending on your needs with this lens. I think it's a really great lens. It's a fun lens for the price. It's a good lens for getting those, you know, wide, epic looking, you know, surreal, distorted shots. It's definitely a good lens for kind of like dipping your toes into a certain type of photography without needing to kind of drop too many dollars straight away. So for me, it's kind of like a good stepping stone lens, if that makes sense. And even though it does have some issues performance-wise, you know, it's a fun lens to use. Some of the images you can get are quite nice, depending on what kind of style you're going for. And at that price point, you can't really complain. So if your needs are like, you know, ultra razor sharpness, then, you know, look elsewhere. But for budget-minded shooters, newcomers, then I think this lens could have a place in your collection. And for the price, you can't really go wrong. But let us know what you thought in the comment section down below. If you're interested in picking this up for yourself or any other Pergear lenses, there will be links in the description. And if you found this video useful, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and you can also follow us on socials. And I guess I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Peace.